Welcome everyone to Daf Yomi, 1 week at a time, Masechet Sanhedrin. This is our 8th class, and today we are going to be reviewing Daf 51 through 57. Okay, so I do want to put out there, we are going to be dealing with, I would say, some pretty difficult concepts, not concepts, but pretty challenging, not in terms of difficult in terms of intelligence, but in terms of very severe topics today. So, we're talking about capital punishment, and last week we spoke about stoning. This week we're going to talk about the other 3 types of capital punishments. So I'm just putting out a, trigger warning that it is going to be a little graphic. I will try to tone it down, but this is what was done in the time of the Sanhedrin. Also, we're going to be discussing different illicit relations and their punishments. So I'm just putting that out there, and we'll go through, and if you want, we can discuss at the end. Okay, so Daf 51, we're going to be discussing the daughter of a Kohen, what's called a Bat Kohen. She gets a more severe punishment if she commits adultery. This is based on the Torah. The Torah teaches us that she gets a more stringent punishment for adultery, but not for other sins. Meaning, it doesn't mean like if she doesn't keep Shabbat, she doesn't get a different punishment. Only for adultery. Now, if she's unmarried and she has relations, this is not considered what we would call znut. Znut is immoral behavior. I mean, it's not okay to do, but it's not the same as adultery, and therefore she does not get the same punishment as we had mentioned for adultery. Or maybe, now this is all going to be based on the wording of the verse. And the Gemara says maybe she only gets the stringent punishment if she had relations with her father. But if she has relations with someone else that she's not allowed to, maybe she would get the regular punishment. The Gemara says no, right? Any girl who has relations with her father is going to get srifa. Srifa is burning, basically. We'll see exactly what that means in a minute. But any girl who has relations with her father is going to get srifa. So therefore, there's no distinction for the daughter of a Kohen. If she is betrothed to anybody, right? It doesn't matter if he is a Kohen, a Levi, or Yisrael, and she has relations with somebody else, she gets srifa, again, burning. You might have thought, again, based on the verse, it's only if she was betrothed to a Kohen. That is not the case. If she marries somebody that she isn't allowed to be married to, right? So let's say a mamzer, someone who is the product of an illicit relation. So and then she has an affair. That's not really seen as official marriage. Therefore, she does not get the same stringent punishment. If the married Bat Kohen, the married daughter of a Kohen, has an affair, so now the Gemara asks, what punishment does she get? Which one is going to be the most stringent? Again, the options are stoning or burning or maybe strangulation. Those are the 3 that we're asking which one she'll get. However, the answer is that so then the Gemara says, let's say right, we're trying to see what is the more severe. We'll see, and we did mention last time that skila, stoning, is one of the worst. And then burning is also one of the worst. We're not sure which one is worse, stoning or burning. Again, it's not about the pain, it's just a matter of the category, whereas the other two, which is beheading and strangulation, are the lesser of the four capital punishments. So now the Gemara says that if a regular woman, again, a regular married woman, has an affair, she gets strangulation. Therefore, the daughter of the Kohen should get, right, gets srifa, gets burning, because it has to be more severe. If a regular being the daughter of a Levi or a Yisrael, if a regular betrothed woman has an affair, she gets stoned. Therefore, right, maybe now the Gemara says maybe the daughter of the Kohen should either get stoned or maybe she gets burnt. Again, the Gemara goes back and forth with different opinions of what is more stringent. And the Gemara says, no, the betrothed daughter of a Kohen gets burnt. If she's married, she gets stoned if she slept with her father-in-law. But if she sleeps with anybody else, she gets strangulation, what's called chenek. Or another opinion is she always, right, Rabbi Shimon says she always gets srifa, she always gets burnt. Then the Gemara says, right, what's the halacha? And then the Gemara says, wait a minute, why does it matter what the halacha is? Already in the time of the Gemara, they were not giving capital punishment, right? Again, as we learned last time, they only gave capital punishment when there was a Sanhedrin. The Sanhedrin was only around when there was a Beit HaMikdash, when there was a temple. When there's no temple, there's no capital punishment. So the Gemara asks, why do we need to know these laws? Why does it matter, what she would get? And the Gemara says, no, it's important for us to learn it, just like we are, and we'll see probably, I don't have to look at the calendar, in about 6 months from now, we're going to start learning all the laws of the sacrifices of the korbanot. And the Gemara says, just like we learn about the sacrifices, even though there's no temple, we are also going to learn about capital punishment because it's important for us to learn. And those of you who are interested, my friend Shuli Mishkin wrote a really beautiful article on the Hadran website about this idea of, right, do we see it as preparing for the Messiah, preparing for Moshiach? Do we see it as just important to learn all of these laws, even though right now they are not applicable, right? The Shemitah, they learned for many years, and now, thank God, we do keep those laws. These laws, I hope we don't keep anytime soon, but okay. All right, so the Gemara continues speaking about the punishment. The Gemara asks, if you remember, we talked about the concept of edim zomemin. These are witnesses that disqualify the original set of witnesses, and we had said that those witnesses get the same punishment they were trying to give to the person that they were, right, involved with. So here the Gemara tells us that the witnesses, the edim zomemin, of a case of the daughter of a Kohen, so those witnesses get the same punishment as the man who this woman slept with, right? Not her punishment, but the man's punishment, right? So that would be right. That would be, let's say, stoning and not burning. Burning is only reserved for the daughter of the Kohen. Okay. Next, Daf Daf 52, we have the next Mishnah, which describes what is sreifa. Again, sreifa means burning. How was this enacted? So it is not, what we see in the movies of like the Salem witch trials. It is not tying someone to a stake and setting them on fire. Rather, you basically you put a person in manure up to their knees so that they can't move. I'm just putting it out there. The Gemara is very descriptive, so okay, I'm just telling you. Okay, so then they wrap a like a scarf or like a rope that's like hard, but it's wrapped around in something soft, and they wrap it around the person's neck, and then they pull on each side. And this is to get the person to open their mouth. Again, they have to be careful not to choke the person. And then they light a wick, a piece of lead. They basically melt it, and then they put it down their throat. And that basically burns the person on the inside. And this is seen as more humane than burning someone at the stake. Another opinion is that they actually open the person's mouth with tongs, because the other way you could strangle the person, and you have to make sure that you don't strangle them, because that's a different type of that is a different punishment. And then the Mishnah says, wait a minute, one time we saw that they burnt the daughter of a Kohen by surrounding her with branches and lighting them on fire, which is the way we would understand it. And the Mishnah says, no, that's wrong. The court was actually made up of tzdukim, of Sadducees, which was a sect of Jews that only followed the written Torah and did not follow the oral Torah. They rejected it, and therefore they did the wrong thing, and rather this is the right thing that needs to be done. The Gemara explains, where do we get the concept that this is what burning is? It's actually learned from Korach. If you remember, in Sefer Bamidbar, in the book of Numbers, we have the story of Korach, and it says that they got burnt from the inside and their body was intact. Another opinion is that we learn it from the sons of Aaron. If you remember, in Sefer Vayikra, in Leviticus, we have the story of the sons of Aaron. They come to the temple. They do something wrong, and they and the Gemara actually is going to talk about it in a minute, what they did wrong, but it says that they were burnt from the inside, meaning their bodies were intact, but they were burnt. What does that mean? Like something happened, and the Gemara explains. But first, the Gemara says, right, maybe Korach, maybe they were actually completely burnt, right? Maybe the entire body was burnt. Or the Gemara says, no, right? It's like a regular death, where, right, when a person regularly dies, their body is intact, but their spirit departs. The same thing here. They say for either Korach or the sons of Aaron that they died, but their bodies were intact. Another opinion is no, the bodies were also burnt, but their clothing was intact. Those are different opinions. The Gemara asks, why do we do this? Again, it sounds gruesome and terrible. The Gemara says it's actually more painful to burn someone from the outside. That would be more painful and more, you're tormenting the person. This is quick, and therefore this is the right way that the person should be killed. Again, we come up, and again, you would think that it's such a crazy thing to say, right? But the Gemara says, right, the Torah says, "Ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, right? You have to love your fellow person like you love yourself. Right? And what does that have to do with capital punishment? One would think that that's the last thing we should be talking about. But the Gemara says, right, we have to make sure that it is what's called a favorable death, meaning as quick as possible. So this seems to be the quickest way to burn somebody. So then the Gemara mentions the sons of Aaron, Nadav, and Avihu. Why did they get killed? Right. So the Gemara says, right, they were walking in behind Moshe and Aaron, and they said to each other, "When are these guys going to die so that we can lead the nation?" And therefore they were killed. Korach, also Korach and his band of not good people. The truth is that they were Torah scholars, but Korach actually convinced them to join with him. And therefore, they were, led down the wrong path. Then the Gemara says, right, there's a story of the daughter of a Kohen that was convicted of adultery, and they burnt her, at the stake. And again, the Gemara says that's wrong. And then the Gemara says, wait a minute, they weren't even allowed to kill her because it was after the destruction of the temple. So the Gemara says, no, maybe this is only the recollection of Rabbi Elazar from when he was very young. So maybe it was during the time of the temple, or maybe he didn't really remember it correctly. Maybe he was young, and maybe it didn't really happen. Okay, next Mishnah is the next type of death, and that is what's called which is beheading. Beheading, right? In Hebrew, the term is saif. Saif literally means a sword. So the Mishnah explains that the person is beheaded with a sword. And again, maybe it's, again, is he standing? Is he sitting? Maybe he should lean down and maybe chop his head off with an axe. That's another opinion in the Mishnah. The Gemara says, right, maybe we shouldn't use a sword because that's how the non-Jews used to kill people, and we don't want to do what the non-Jews do. Or since the Torah tells us to use a sword, you're allowed to use a sword. Who gets beheaded? This is for people who murder and a city, what's called in Hebrew an ir nidachat, a city where the majority of the city worships idols. So they are all killed with beheading, and you use a sword, right? You can't use the edge of a sword. You can't stab the person. Rather, he needs to be beheaded. And the Gemara says, right, murderers are compared to Egla Arufa. If you remember, Egla Arufa is the calf that is also beheaded when a dead body is found outside of two cities, and you're not sure which city the murdered person came from, and therefore they do this ceremony by bringing a calf down to the riverbed and you kill it. So therefore, and it is actually beheaded, except that the calf is actually beheaded from the back using an axe. But for the Gemara says that is not a favorable, again, as we said before, a favorable way to die. It seems that the sword is more merciful, and therefore you use a sword. Next Mishnah, what's called chenek. Chenek is strangulation. Again, you put the person in manure, and again, you take that scarf or a rope and you wrap it around the neck, and two people pull from either side till he dies. The Gemara explains who gets chenek, who gets strangulation. This is a punishment for adultery. Who gets this? It has to be an adult. It has to be that an adult has relations with a married woman who is married to a Jew, and that person gets chenek. The Gemara tells us that anytime the Torah says the person shall die, in Hebrew it says mot yumat, right? They will die, they'll be put to death. This is chenek. This is strangulation. This is seen as the most lenient punishment in the capital punishment category. Okay, and the Gemara says, why do we do it this way? Again, it's connected to a regular death, just like you don't see any change on the outside. Therefore, you have to do it this way. Daf 53 that tells us that there's a tradition that there are 4 capital punishments. Again, the 4 that we mentioned, even though chenek, right, strangulation, isn't mentioned explicitly in the Torah, the other ones are, but chenek isn't. We learn that there are 4, and that is the tradition. Right, all other people that get stoning, and we'll see who that is in a minute, right? Not all of them are explicit in the Torah. We learn it from people who speak to like dead people. It's called Ov and Yidoni. It was a type of either sorcery, this some sort of, I guess, like black magic. We learn it from Oven Yudoni, just like they get skila. So too, we'll see who else also gets stoned. We said that, and we'll continue, that different sins get different punishments. However, if you, let's say, can't catch the convict, let's say the guy is running away from you, and he's supposed to be stoned, you don't have to run after him with stones. You can actually run after him and kill him in any way that you can get him. The idea is that he deserves capital punishment, but if it's not feasible, then basically you can kill him in any way that you can. Okay, the next Mishnah tells us that the following get stoned if you had relations, right? If a man had relations with his mother, his father's wife, his daughter-in-law, with another male, with an animal, a person who blasphemes, we'll see what that means, an idolater, someone who practices Ov and Yidoni, again, as I mentioned, this type of sorcery, someone who desecrates Shabbat, someone who curses their parents, someone who has relations with a young girl who is betrothed. In Hebrew, it's called Na'ara HaMu'urasa, and someone who causes others to do idolatry, and someone who causes a city to do idolatry, and a sorcerer, and a rebellious son, right? The one who's it's called a ben sorer umore. It's not just regular rebellion, it's a very specific thing. All of these people, again, just to remind ourselves, when do they get capital punishment? If they were they were warned beforehand in front of witnesses. They admit that they realize that they're going to get punished. Again, if the proper witnesses come. But if all of those things happen, these people get stoned. If someone slept with his mother by accident, don't ask me. how that happens, but by accident. So then again, anything that's by accident, bishogeg, you're going to bring a sacrifice, right? A sin offering, a korban chatat. So the Mishnah tells us that this person who slept with his mother actually brings two sacrifices, one for the fact that he slept with his mother, and one for the fact that he slept with his father's wife. Or maybe he only brings one. Let's say a person slept with his father's wife, who's not his mother. Again, he has to bring two sacrifices for his father's wife, and because she was a married woman. And this is whether or not his father is alive. The same with the daughter-in-law, and the same as whether they were engaged or married. Again, now we're going to get into like interesting cases of, again, if someone's going to get killed, it doesn't matter how many sins he did, he's only getting killed once. But if you're bringing a sacrifice, we have to know how many transgressions are there. And that's what we're going to discuss right now. So the Gemara says, if a person's mother wasn't allowed to be married to the father, right, for whatever reason, let's say she was divorced and he was a Kohen, so then you only have to bring one sacrifice. If they're not really married, so then it's not seen as his father's wife, and therefore you do not have to bring a sacrifice for that. If a man dies without children, right, so he has to do yibum, the brother has to do yibum. If the woman, right, the wife, is forbidden to the brother, to the yavam, by secondary arayot, which means, right, secondary prohibited relations, or if she is forbidden to him because he's a Kohen and she's a widow or a divorcee, so then they need to do chalitza, right? If you remember from Masachet Yevamot, we learned that if you cannot do yibum, if you cannot get married, so then you do chalitza, and that is the case. If a person sleeps with, again, we said, if the person sleeps with his mother, you only bring one sacrifice for his mother, and not for his father's wife, even if they are married. If he sleeps with his daughter-in-law, two sacrifices, one for his daughter-in-law and one because she's married. The Gemara says that the verse says ervat avicha, which literally means like it literally means like the nakedness of your father. But it could also mean like actually having relations with your father. That is the simple understanding. Again, this is for a man, right, is prohibited to have relations with his father. But the Gemara says this really means the father's wife. You're not allowed to have relations with your father's wife, whether or not she is your mother. The next verse says, right, if she's also your mother, again, then maybe you are only liable for one or maybe liable for two. Okay, Daf 54, right, the punishment for sleeping with your father's wife is stoning. The verse that warns us to not do it is, as we said, ervat avicha lo tegaleh, right? The basically it means the wife of your father you should not have relations with. Rava says that it's not about the father's own nakedness, meaning it doesn't mean having relations with the father, right? It actually means with his wife, right? Whether or not she's the mother, she is the mother or not. And it includes the mother that isn't married to the father, right? You get the same punishment as well. The sages say, ervat avicha, again, the same verse, is actually about sodomy with the father, and you get two punishments, right? One for sodomy in general, and the other for having relations with your father. And then and then again, right? You also learn for the father's brother as well. If the father dies, it's still forbidden to sleep with his wife, and this is learned from the verse that we mentioned before. Another verse says, right, imechahi, right, she is your mother, right? That is to say that you cannot have relations with your mother, whether or not she is married to your father. Okay, next Mishnah. Next Mishnah teaches that a man is not allowed to have relations with another man or with an animal, and the punishment is skila, is stoning. The animal also gets killed. The reason is because okay, so there are two terms that the Gemara uses. One is in Hebrew, the word is takala. Takala means this animal, caused, because of this animal, the person got killed. And therefore, it like brought the person down, and therefore it should get killed. The other term, so that's called takala. The other term is called kalon, and this means it's shameful, it's embarrassing, right? The animal shouldn't walk around, and then people will say, you see that animal? That's the animal that so-and-so had relations with. And therefore, the animal is killed. We're going to see in the Gemara, we're going to discuss, do you need both of those like scenarios of takala and kalon, right? Or one is enough, and we'll see that in the Gemara. First, we're going to talk about basically sodomy, and the Gemara explains that only an adult who has relations with another man is going to get punished. And again, it's based on a verse which is seems to be very clear that a man is not allowed to have relations with another man, and he gets stoned for it. And again, it's compared to Ov and Yedoni, as we said before, these like people who speak to the dead, they also get stoned. Therefore, this person also gets stoned. There's a verse that teaches a warning, basically, for the perpetrator, but also for the person who is being sodomized as well. Both of them get punished, and that's that. Then for bestiality, there's a verse that says you cannot have relations with an animal. Again, you get stoned. And as we said, you kill the animal and the person. It doesn't matter if the person was male or female. And the Gemara gives the other verse that describes the warning. Basically, the Gemara says that in order to get punished, there needs to be a verse that says, don't do it, and another verse that says, if you do it, this is the punishment. So that is what we're looking for in terms of sources in the Torah. Let's say a person was both the perpetrator and the receiver, they get two punishments, again, or maybe only one. Again, if they're getting killed, it doesn't matter. But if it was accidental, which we'll discuss in a minute, so then it's a discussion of how many sacrifices they need to bring, one or two. Right? Then the Gemara, of course, now has to make it a little bit more complicated. If a person was sodomized by a person and an animal, do they have to bring two sacrifices or one sacrifice? If they were if they did basically all four things, then again, do they bring 3? Do they bring 4? Do they bring 2? The Gemara discusses it. Then it discusses an age, right? So if a man had, again, sodomy with a minor or an adult, for a boy, right, under 9 is seen as, again, under 13 is a minor, but basically over 9 and 1 day, that is seen as actual relations. Again, a minor is not going to get punished. They are seen as, just not having control, and therefore a minor is never punished. Again, even if it's consensual, the minor is never punished. For a girl, again, also, relations is seen as relations as long as the girl is over 3. Again, this is to make the adult liable. The child is never going to be liable. Okay. Then the Gemara asks, what if it's not full penetration? What if it's just initial stage of intercourse that is also prohibited? So too with an animal. Daf 55. The Gemara asks, what if a man sodomizes himself? The Gemara says, what are you talking about? That is anatomically not possible. The Gemara says, well, if the person was, anyway, it's not possible, but tries to construct a case, and even if it was possible, it is still forbidden. Let's say a non-Jew and an animal had relations. So again, what's the case? Does the animal get killed or not? Right. One opinion is yes. Again, here remember we talked about the 2 reasons the animal gets killed. One is because it will cause the downfall of the person. The other is because the person is embarrassed. So here the Gemara is saying, well, the non-Jew, let's say, isn't embarrassed about bestiality, so maybe we don't kill the animal because there's no embarrassment. So the Gemara says no, the animal does get killed. If a person had relations with an animal by accident, again, there is embarrassment, but it wasn't on purpose. Do we kill the animal? And then the Gemara says, let's learn it with if a person had relations with a girl who was at least 3, that is seen as having relations. But if that girl had relations with an animal, you kill the animal, right? Again, because there's shame, but it's not on purpose. If she did it on purpose, again, she doesn't die, as we said before. A minor, even if they do this act on purpose, they do not get killed, but the animal dies. The same thing for a boy who's 9 years and a day. It is seen as a valid intercourse, but again, the animal is killed. Okay, next Mishnah. Who else gets stoned? We said a blasphemer. A blasphemer is someone who curses God, and he is only liable when he says God's name. Daf 56, the Mishnah continues. How do we prosecute that person? So they're brought to court, and the witnesses speak in nicknames, because they they don't want to use God's name and say this person cursed God. This is what he said, because then they would be actually cursing God. So what do they say, right? They say, oh, this person said, right? May Yossi kill Yossi. Now, what are we talking about, right? Yossi here is instead of saying God's name, why, right? So it has 4 letters, right? God's name, Yud, and then a Hey, and then a Yud, and then a Vav, and then a Hey. That letter, that word, right, is God's name. So you say Yossi instead. It also has the same numerical value as Yud K Vav K. And the witnesses don't say the actual name of God. But when they decide that the person is liable, right, and they want to convict him, so then when the case is over, they cannot kill him unless they hear exactly what he said. And therefore, right before they give the verdict, they send everybody out of the courtroom, and they have one of the witnesses stand up and say exactly what he heard with God's name, and he says it, and then the judges stand up and they rip their shirts, right? This is a sign of mourning, because it's a terrible thing to hear. And then the second witness confirms, that's what I heard. He doesn't have to say it again. And that's the end of that. Okay, so now the Gemara explains, right? A person needs to say, in order to be convicted, they need to have said God's name twice, right? May God strike down God, right? Or cursing God, but they use God's name twice. And this is based on a verse. Maybe, again, maybe they have to curse God's name. Sorry. The verse says, ish, ish, right? A man, a man. But it also includes non-Jews. If a non-Jew curses God, he also gets punished, but he gets beheaded, not stoned. Because we're going to learn, and we're going to see that in a few minutes, about the 7 Noachide laws. Sheva mitzvot b'nei Noach. We're going to learn about them in a minute. Right? If they do not keep these 7 laws, they get saif, they get beheaded. The blasphemer also gets punished for any nickname of God. It doesn't only have to be God's name the way we said it before. And now the Gemara tells us about the 7 laws, right? We know that Jews have 613 laws. We believe that non-Jews also have mitzvot, they also have commandments, but they have 7. What are the 7 laws? So the Gemara on Daf 56 tells us they need to set up a court system. They're not allowed to curse God. They're not allowed to worship idols. They're not allowed to commit adultery, murder, theft, and they're not allowed to eat a limb or meat from a living animal, right? That's called ever min hachai. So those are the 7 laws. The Gemara adds that there are other opinions as to what are the 7. Another opinion adds, right? Everyone agrees that there are 7, but some say, like we'll transfer or combine some. That they're not allowed to eat blood from a living animal. They're not allowed to sterilize themselves. Another rabbi adds, sorcery is a problem, and so is kilayim. Kilayim is, here it doesn't mean planting. Sorry, it does not mean planting 2 species together, which is a commandment for the Jews. Rather, it means that they're not allowed to mate two different animals together, two species together, and they are not allowed to graft two trees. Okay, so now the Gemara explains where do we learn the 7 Noachide laws. So the Gemara tells us it's based on the verse in Breshit. So I'll just read the verse out in Hebrew. Vayitzav Hashem Elokim al ha'adam limor mikol eitz hagan, right? Achol ta'achel. What's this verse? God tells Adam, man, that he can eat from any of the trees in the garden. So basically, every word is explained as a different type of commandment, right? So vayitzav means to command. So that means they have to set up a court system. Hashem, right? So you're not allowed to curse God's name. Elokim means, right, you cannot do idolatry. Al ha'adam, right, on man, means you can't murder. Lemor, right, tell him, is about illicit relations. From all the trees, right, you're not allowed to steal, and you should eat. That is, you cannot eat from a living animal. Another opinion is that some of the words are switched. If a non-Jew makes an idol but doesn't bow down to it, that is okay. But if he bows down to it, so then he is liable. And now the Gemara goes through each one of these things and says, really, is it one of the 7? Is it not one of the 7? So the Gemara says, again, a court system, they have to set up a court, maybe not in every city, but in some cities. And then, right, we said that they can't worship idols, they can't curse God. Daf 57 tells us that there's another verse that teaches the 7 mitzvot. And the Gemara goes through each word and finds a source for each one of the 7 mitzvot. One opinion is that for 3 out of the 7, a non-Jew is going to get killed. Again, if he murders, has illicit relations, or curses God, or maybe for 4 of them he gets killed, or maybe all 7 of them, if he doesn't do them, he gets killed. The Gemara says, really, if a non-Jew steals, he's going to get killed? The Gemara says yes, right? Or another opinion is no. And the Gemara constructs cases of things that are like theft, that the non-Jew is going to get punished for, whereas maybe a Jew would not get punished for, right? If he steals less than the value of a pruta, or if he withholds wages from a worker, that is seen as theft, and he will get killed. A non-Jew can be so now the Gemara says, what's the difference between capital punishment for a non-Jew and capital punishment for a Jew? A non-Jew can be executed only by one judge and one witness and without any warning, but a woman cannot be the witness. The non-Jew is liable for also killing a fetus, right? If he struck a pregnant woman and she miscarries, so then he is liable for killing that fetus. And again, the Gemara brings sources for each one of these ideas. How do we know that the non-Jew is liable for killing a fetus? Right? It says, if a person spills blood of a man in a man, how could that be? Right? Again, it must be a fetus, which is inside of a person. Right? Or maybe this is just talking about killing someone when his blood is on the inside. the Gemara again teaches that for illicit relations, a non-Jew is also going to get killed if he sleeps with someone he is not allowed to sleep with. And the Gemara goes through which relations are punishable by death for a non-Jew and which are not. And with that, we finish this week's daf, which was a lot. So I know it was a little gory and explicit, but we do have a few minutes. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
But there is no end to the questions. I'll keep it to one.
Okay.
This was only during temple times, correct? The temple was destroyed. All of this was over. Well, thank goodness, Baruch. All right. Was there ever a place where Teshuvah played? The guy says, I'm sorry, don't kill me. I didn't mean to do that. Was there some place?
It's a great question. In Judaism, tshuva is always very important, but there's a concept that if you do something severe, then there are consequences. And, this is one of those consequences, meaning the person does tshuva, they will still get capital punishment, and that between the tshuva, the repentance, and the death, that will bring them atonement. So that's now it is also important to recognize that in order to get capital punishment, all the things need to align, which is very challenging, right? There are cases where we say, if a court killed one person a year, that was a lot. So it's not like this was happening a lot. Again, as we said, you need very specific things to happen, right? It's not a jury, it's not a DNA evidence, right? It needs to be very specific. And if those criteria are not met, which are very hard, the person is not going to get killed. He's not going to get punished. So it is important. I know we really were very explicit on all of these things, but how often they happened is a good question, right? Did they really happen? So we don't know.
And if we reinstate the temple, is all this going to come back theoretically? Yeah, I know. I don't know.
I'm not touching that one. Yeah, I'm not touching that one. Yes, Ilanit. Wait, we can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, so just I know everyone must probably feel the same way. This is such incredibly difficult material, and for you to just speak it, I know it was hard. Just amazed that you could just go through it. But I'm reminded that, I have read some wisdom on this where we're instructed to understand that we don't understand. And that all of the Torah is absolutely beautiful, and that our God is so just, and we can't comprehend how he is so just, that he is bringing justice into this world and balancing everything, and that it is a part of his love language to say, I'm going to reveal to you these things, you'll do them, and we don't understand. So we get all offended, but it was like it's not supposed to cause offense. So when we get to that area where we're suddenly recoiling and we want to lash out and judge, that perhaps I've heard it explained that we might just take a step back and just realize, I don't understand clearly. I just don't understand, because all of the Torah is beautiful and full of life. And so I'll just step back and let God be God. And I know that when it comes back for us, and it will, we will somehow discern that it is fair and just and beautiful, and we'll be able to do it. I really know we will be able to do it, and we will not cause offense.
Yeah, again, first of all, I appreciate the comment. I think it's very important. I think that I don't know what's going to happen in the future. I definitely don't understand, everything that I have been teaching. And I think that you are correct in the sense that when these things, touch, hit a nerve, or they sound incomprehensible to modern sensitivity, or ethics or morality. I think it is important, like you said, to take a step back. And I'm not justifying anything here or there. I'm also not judging here or there. I do feel the need to say that definitely when, let's say, speaking about, let's say, homosexuality, I think it is important to make a distinction between the act and a relationship. We've been talking about the act, and as opposed to, it doesn't say, again, like, I don't know, I don't want to get in trouble, but it doesn't, it doesn't say you can't love someone, and it's talking about a very specific thing. But more than that, again, like this isn't a philosophy class. I think that it is interesting to hear how the Gemara understands all of these topics. But more than that, I think, I'm happy to move on to the next topic, as they say.
I think that it's very important for our own sanity to realize that we are a limited being and we don't understand the full complexity of the universe. And once we accept that, and we have to accept it, then we just have to do what we're told without necessarily understanding, because we're limited.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
Be'ezrat Hashem, hopefully next week we'll have a little bit less death and killing and destruction, but who knows? Stay tuned for next week.
Yeah.
Happy
Thank
Tu
you.
B'Shvat. Here
Yes.
it comes tonight for us.
Yes, Tu B'Shvat Sameach.
Yeah. Thank you.
Rosh
Thank you.
Hashanah, happy birthday to all the trees. And wishing
What
everyone.
What have you had for Tu B'Shvat? Have you had anything specific to eat?
Not yet, but I hope to. Usually the Friday night, like the Shabbat of the week of Tu B'Shvat, we usually do like a Tu B'Shvat Seder.
Oh, I love those.
So
Yeah, those are
looking
great.
forward to that.
Well, I didn't do a Seder, but what I did have is I had a carob, which I made a shechianu on, and I
Wow.
had a pomegranate that's been sitting in my fruit bowl for quite some time. And I said, okay, now's the time.
That's last
Now's the time.
December.
Wow.
Zohar, I'm going to taste a raw carob for the first time in my life. I never realized you could, I mean, I know you ground up and everything, but I didn't know you just eat the pods.
They're
And,
not so-
and I'm
they're
going
not
to
so yummy.
taste that. I'm very excited.
That's good. That's good.
Hopefully it's not too hard, that you don't break your teeth on it. And be careful, there are little pits in it, little teeny pits in it. But yeah.
Okay.
Pomegranate.
Wishing
Okay.
everyone Tu B'Shvat Sameach and Shabbat Shalom, everyone.
Maximum.
Um,